"Get out now before I call the police on your dirty black ass." The cruel words echoed across the hospital lobby like a gunshot. Every nurse froze, every visitor turned. Security guards tightened their grip on the thin man standing near the entrance. His beard was untrimmed, his coat was torn, his shoes were worn through from years of walking cold city streets. To everyone watching, he looked like another homeless stranger who had wandered into a place where he did not belong. But the man did not lower his eyes. He did not beg, he did not retreat. He looked directly toward the intensive care unit and spoke with a calm certainty that silenced the room. 10 surgeons had already walked away from the dying young woman upstairs. 10 experts had admitted defeat. Yet this forgotten man claimed he could save her life. The statement sounded impossible. It sounded insane. What nobody in that hallway understood was that the stranger had once been one of the most gifted pediatric heart surgeons in America. His name was Bennett Dawson. Years earlier, before hardship carved lines into his face, he had stood among the brightest minds at Whitfield Memorial Hospital in Manhattan. At 35 years old, Bennett had become one of the youngest attending pediatric cardiac surgeons in the institution's history. He was also the only black surgeon on a powerful senior surgical board dominated by men who rarely welcomed outsiders. His talent was undeniable. His results spoke louder than titles. Children with impossible heart defects survived because of his hands. Bennett specialized in the cases that terrified other surgeons. Newborns with malformed hearts. Tiny patients whose lives depended on movements measured in millimeters. One mistake could destroy an entire future. Bennett never ran from those challenges. He sought them out. His survival rate became legendary within the department. Parents prayed for him by name. Nurses trusted him without hesitation. Yet success did not earn him acceptance. Every achievement only deepened the resentment of people who believed he did not belong beside them. The hospital corridors carried quiet judgments. Conversations stopped when Bennett entered a room. Colleagues questioned his qualifications even after watching him perform miracles. Some smiled in public and undermined him in private. Bennett rarely responded. He poured every ounce of energy into saving children. When his long shifts ended, he returned to a modest apartment in Harlem. The space was small but filled with purpose. Medical textbooks covered tables and shelves. Research papers occupied every corner. On his nightstand stood a framed photograph of his mother, Ruth Dawson. Ruth had spent decades working exhausting nursing shifts to support her son's dream. She believed in him with a devotion stronger than logic. Every week she called to check on him. Every night she prayed for him. Bennett carried her faith wherever he went. He also carried 2 objects that meant more than anyone knew. The first was an old surgical timer given to him by his mentor, Dr. Eleanor Voss. The second was a black leather notebook containing years of research. Inside those pages lived a revolutionary heart surgery technique Bennett believed could save children previously considered beyond help. While Bennett dedicated his life to healing, another man focused on protecting power. Victor Hargrove served as chief of cardiac surgery. He possessed experience, influence, and connections stretching through every level of the hospital. His family name decorated buildings. His authority went unquestioned, yet beneath his polished reputation lived a dangerous insecurity. Bennett's brilliance exposed everything Victor feared about himself. Every successful operation reminded him that talent could not be inherited. Every compliment directed toward Bennett felt like a personal insult. Over time, admiration turned into envy. Envy slowly transformed into something far darker. Elsewhere in New York, billionaire real estate magnate Gregory Ashford lived a life most people could never imagine. He controlled enormous wealth and tremendous influence. Yet his greatest treasure was neither money nor power. It was his daughter, Hannah Ashford. After losing his wife years earlier, Gregory devoted himself completely to raising Hannah. She became the center of his world. Nothing mattered more. Unfortunately, money could not shield her from illness. As her rare heart condition worsened, Gregory discovered a painful truth. Some problems cannot be solved with wealth alone. 3 lives were moving toward the same collision. A gifted surgeon fighting invisible enemies, a powerful chief desperate to protect his position, a billionaire father terrified of losing his child. None of them knew how quickly everything would change. Beyond the bright hospital lights, storm clouds gathered above Manhattan. The city hummed with restless energy. Traffic rolled through wet streets. Ambulance sirens echoed between buildings. Somewhere high above the skyline, a medical helicopter cut across the darkening sky. And as Bennett Dawson stared at the hospital that had once been his home, a desperate cry drifted from an upper-floor window. The sound stopped him cold. It carried fear, exhaustion, and the terrible weight of fading hope. Bennett looked toward the building and felt something awaken inside him. The world believed he was finished. The world believed his story had ended years ago. Yet the cry from that room told him otherwise. Before the night was over, he would walk through those doors again, and nothing inside Whitfield Memorial would ever be the same. The cry from the upper floor lingered in Bennett Dawson's mind long after it faded. He remained frozen outside Whitfield Memorial, staring through the glass entrance. Rain clouds hung low over Manhattan, casting grey shadows across the streets. The city moved with its usual urgency, yet everything around Bennett suddenly felt distant. The sound he had heard was not ordinary fear. It was the sound of someone running out of hope. For 3 years, Bennett had lived like a ghost, watching life continue without him. Each morning, he sat near the hospital entrance. He never begged. He never asked for sympathy. He simply watched doctors enter the building where he once saved children. Most avoided eye contact. Some pretended not to recognize him. A few tossed coins in his direction without slowing down. Those moments hurt more than hunger ever could. Once people had trusted him with their children's lives. Now strangers assumed he could not even care for himself. The contrast would have destroyed many men. Yet Bennett refused to surrender completely. Every night he practiced. While others slept in shelters or wandered the streets, he trained his hands. He stitched torn fabric. He balanced grains of rice with forceps. He repeated delicate movements until muscle memory became stronger than despair. His mentor's words never left him. Steady hands, steady heart. Those 4 words echoed through every difficult day. They reminded him who he had been before the accusations, before the hearings, before the lies. Deep inside, Bennett still believed the truth mattered. He simply no longer believed anyone cared enough to hear it. That morning felt different. Activity around the hospital had intensified. Black luxury vehicles lined the emergency entrance. Security personnel appeared at every doorway. Medical helicopters arrived one after another. Nurses whispered nervously. Administrators hurried through hallways with worried expressions. Bennett had spent enough time near the hospital to recognize unusual patterns. Something extraordinary was happening. The answers arrived through fragments of conversation drifting from an open break room window. Nurses spoke in hushed voices between exhausted breaths. Gregory Ashford's daughter was dying. Specialists had been flown in from across the country. Every surgeon who examined her case reached the same conclusion. Nothing could be done. The condition was too complex. The risks were too high. The outcome was nearly hopeless. Then Bennett heard the diagnosis. His heart nearly stopped. He knew the condition intimately. Years earlier, while developing his revolutionary research, he had spent countless nights studying exactly that type of cardiac defect. Most surgeons considered it nearly impossible to repair. Bennett had never accepted that conclusion. His experimental procedure had been designed specifically for patients like Hannah Ashford. Suddenly, his notebook flashed through his memory. Every sketch, every calculation, every sleepless night spent searching for answers. The procedure existed because of cases like hers. Bennett knew what others did not. He knew there was a chance. The realization left him trembling. Not from fear, from responsibility. He stood from the bench and began pacing. Logic told him to walk away. Nobody would believe him. His medical license had been destroyed. His reputation had been buried beneath false accusations. To the world, he was a disgraced surgeon living on the streets. Entering that hospital would invite humiliation. Security would remove him before anyone listened. Yet another voice challenged every excuse. A young woman was dying. And he knew something that might save her. Bennett closed his eyes. Immediately another face appeared. Tommy Weston, the little boy whose death had shattered everything. The memory remained as sharp as broken glass. Tommy's small body, the monitors, the desperate attempts to reverse disaster. The terrible silence afterward. Bennett still carried that pain every day, not because he had failed the child, but because he had been powerless to stop the man who caused the tragedy. He opened his eyes and looked toward the hospital. Not again. This time he refused to stand aside. Straightening his torn jacket, Bennett brushed dirt from his sleeves and headed toward the entrance. Each step felt heavier than the last. The lobby doors seemed impossibly far away. Security guards noticed him immediately. Their expressions hardened. Hospital staff glanced over with annoyance. He barely crossed the threshold before a guard grabbed his arm. "Sir, you need to leave." Bennett did not resist. Instead, his eyes landed on a cardiac monitor mounted along the hallway. The screen displayed live patient telemetry. Years of training activated instantly. Numbers transformed into a story only experienced surgeons could read. His expression changed. That patient's oxygen saturation had dropped dangerously low. The right ventricle was failing. Bennett spoke without thinking. "You should check her medication dosage immediately." The nearest nurse froze. She glanced at the monitor, then at Bennett, then back at the monitor. Shock spread across her face. He was right. Before anyone could react, a nearby intensive care unit door opened. A tall man stepped into the hallway. His expensive suit looked wrinkled from exhaustion. His eyes were bloodshot. Grief and fear weighed heavily on his shoulders. Even those unfamiliar with business news would have recognized him instantly. Gregory Ashford, the billionaire father whose daughter lay dying upstairs. For a long moment, Bennett and Gregory stared at one another. One possessed unimaginable wealth. The other possessed nothing at all. Yet only one of them held the knowledge that might save Hannah's life. Bennett took a slow breath. The hallway grew silent. Nurses stopped moving. Security loosened their grip. Rain tapped softly against distant windows. Then Bennett spoke words that changed everything. "I can save your daughter." Gregory Ashford stared at him as though he had lost his mind. But before anyone could laugh, dismiss him, or call security again, Bennett calmly began describing Hannah's heart defect in precise medical detail. With every sentence, Gregory's expression changed. Confusion became curiosity. Curiosity became disbelief. And disbelief slowly transformed into hope. For the first time since Hannah entered the hospital, someone was not explaining why she would die. Someone was explaining how she might live. Across the hallway, a nurse quietly covered her mouth because she recognized the name being whispered among stunned staff members. Bennett Dawson, the surgeon everyone believed had disappeared forever. The conference room on the 4th floor felt colder than any operating room in the hospital. Rain streaked across the massive glass windows overlooking Manhattan. Beyond the skyline, storm clouds darkened the afternoon sky. Inside, 11 people sat around a polished table, studying the homeless man standing before them. No one offered Bennett Dawson a chair. No one offered him water. Most of them were still questioning why he had been allowed upstairs at all. Gregory Ashford stood near the wall with folded arms. Exhaustion shadowed every feature on his face. 3 days without proper sleep had left him hollow. Yet despite his skepticism, something about Bennett's confidence prevented him from walking away. The room remained silent. Bennett approached the large glass wall overlooking Central Park. He picked up a dry erase marker resting nearby. Several administrators exchanged confused looks. One surgeon rolled his eyes. Victor Hargrove was not present yet, but his influence lingered throughout the room. Most people there still believed the official story. Bennett Dawson had lost a patient. Bennett Dawson had been fired. Bennett Dawson had destroyed his own career. They expected excuses. Instead, Bennett began drawing. His hand moved steadily across the glass. A heart appeared, then another structure, then arteries, valves, defects, connections. Every line emerged without hesitation. 4 minutes later, the room had completely changed. The drawing covered nearly half the glass wall. One young resident stood up from his seat. His eyes widened. He looked at the hospital scans displayed on a nearby monitor, then back at Bennett's drawing, then back again. The two images were nearly identical. Bennett had never seen the scans, yet he had recreated Hannah Ashford's heart from memory using only the diagnosis he overheard downstairs. No one spoke. Even Gregory Ashford stepped closer. For the first time, genuine hope flickered behind his exhausted eyes. Bennett continued drawing. This time he added something new. A pathway, a solution. The room watched as he outlined a modified blood flow route capable of bypassing the damaged structures that had defeated every previous specialist. Lines curved gracefully across the glass. Calculations followed. Measurements appeared. The procedure looked unlike anything most of the physicians had ever seen. One senior surgeon leaned forward. Another removed his glasses and stared. The atmosphere shifted from skepticism to fascination. Then a voice shattered the silence. "My God." Everyone turned. Dr. Pamela Greer stood in the doorway, one of the nation's most respected pediatric cardiac surgeons. The 10th expert brought in to save Hannah. She had been preparing to leave the hospital after declining the case. Now she stared at the drawing in disbelief. "That is the Dawson shunt." The room froze. Several physicians exchanged confused glances. Gregory Ashford narrowed his eyes. Before anyone could ask questions, the conference room door burst open. Victor Hargrove entered. The energy changed instantly. He wore his white coat like armor. Authority followed him wherever he walked. For years, nobody challenged his position. Nobody questioned his decisions. Then he saw Bennett. For a fraction of a second, color vanished from his face. Only a fraction. But Bennett noticed, Pamela noticed, and Gregory noticed. Victor recovered quickly. "Security," his voice cut through the room. "Remove this man immediately." No one moved. Victor's eyes hardened. He pointed directly at Bennett. "This individual is a former surgeon whose license was revoked. He was dismissed after causing the death of a child. He has no legal authority to practice medicine. Everything he says is irrelevant." Each sentence landed with practiced precision. Years earlier, those same accusations had destroyed Bennett's life. Now Victor expected them to work again. Bennett remained silent. He did not defend himself. He did not argue. He simply stood beside the drawing. Gregory Ashford slowly turned toward Victor. The billionaire studied him carefully, then asked a simple question. "Can you save my daughter?" Victor blinked. "We are exploring every available option. Can you save her?" The room grew tense. There are significant complexities involved. Gregory's expression darkened. "Can you save her?" Victor opened his mouth. No answer came. That silence spoke louder than any explanation. For days, Gregory had listened to specialists describe limitations, risks, complications, probabilities. Not one had offered hope. Only Bennett had done that. Gregory turned toward the former surgeon. "If you can save her, what do you need?" The question stunned the room. Victor immediately objected. "This is absurd." Gregory ignored him. Bennett finally spoke. "3 conditions." The billionaire nodded. "Go on." "First, I choose my own surgical team. Done. Second, every second of the operation is recorded. Multiple cameras, multiple angles. Nothing can disappear." A shadow crossed Victor's face. Gregory noticed. "Done." "Third." Bennett looked directly at Victor. "He does not enter the operating room." The room exploded. Victor slammed both palms against the table. "This is my department. This is my hospital." Gregory's voice became dangerously calm. "No." The room immediately fell silent. "It is not." He stepped forward. "My daughter is dying upstairs. 10 surgeons have already failed to help her. The only person in this building who appears to have a plan is standing beside that window." Nobody interrupted. Nobody breathed. Gregory turned toward his legal team. "Prepare whatever paperwork is necessary. I want emergency privileges authorized immediately." Victor stared in disbelief. The decision had already been made. Within minutes, lawyers filled the conference room. Phone calls followed. Approvals arrived. Signatures accumulated. Hospital executives reluctantly complied. The process moved with astonishing speed because Gregory Ashford possessed enough influence to bend entire institutions. At last, a folder was placed before Bennett. Temporary surgical authorization. Legal, binding, effective immediately. 3 years after losing everything, Bennett Dawson held official credentials once again. For a moment, he simply stared at the document. Then he folded it carefully and placed it inside his coat pocket. The room remained silent. Victor's face had grown pale. Pamela Greer stepped beside Bennett. "I want in." He looked at her. She smiled slightly. I have waited years to see this procedure performed. Use me as first assist." Bennett nodded. Around them, the storm intensified outside. Thunder rolled across Manhattan. Rain hammered the windows. Yet something far more dangerous was unfolding inside Whitfield Memorial. As Bennett walked toward the surgical floor, Victor Hargrove quietly reached into his pocket. His hands trembled with rage. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. When someone answered, Victor spoke only 2 words: "Stop him." And somewhere inside the hospital, forces already began moving against Bennett Dawson once again. Bennett Dawson walked toward the surgical wing with calm determination, but danger followed closely behind him. Rain battered the hospital windows as thunder rolled across Manhattan. The atmosphere inside Whitfield Memorial felt charged with tension. Doctors whispered in hallways. Nurses exchanged nervous glances. News of Bennett's return had spread through every floor faster than anyone imagined. Some remembered him as the brilliant surgeon who saved impossible cases. Others remembered only the accusations. Most remembered both. As Bennett entered the surgical preparation area, Dr. Pamela Greer hurried beside him. Her expression remained serious. "I need to ask you something." Bennett stopped. Pamela studied him carefully. Years ago, Dr. Eleanor Voss spoke about a surgeon she considered extraordinary. She said he developed a technique capable of changing pediatric cardiac medicine forever. She believed only one person could perform it correctly. Bennett remained silent. Pamela continued, "She never told me his name." Then she asked a question. "What is the maximum safe angle of the neoconduit relative to the pulmonary valve?" The answer came instantly. 32 degrees, no hesitation, no uncertainty. Pamela slowly smiled. If the angle increases, blood flow becomes unstable. If it narrows, pressure eventually destroys the conduit. 32 degrees is the only viable solution. Bennett nodded. Pamela exhaled deeply. "That confirms it." "Confirms what?" "You are the surgeon Eleanor was talking about." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Pamela looked toward the operating rooms. "Let's save this girl." Meanwhile, word of Bennett's identity continued spreading throughout the hospital. Nurses who had worked beside him years earlier began appearing near the surgical floor. Many carried guilt. Many carried regret. Most had remained silent during the investigation that destroyed his career. Not because they believed he was guilty, because they were afraid. One woman finally approached him. Patricia Holloway, 63 years old, 30 years of operating room experience. One of the finest surgical nurses Bennett had ever worked with. Her eyes filled with emotion the moment she saw him. For several seconds she could not speak. Then the words finally emerged. "We knew." Bennett looked at her quietly. Every nurse in that operating room knew Victor cut the wrong vessel. Her voice trembled. "We saw everything. We watched it happen." Pain flashed across Bennett's face, not anger, not resentment, only sadness. Patricia lowered her eyes. "We should have spoken. He would have destroyed us, but we still should have spoken." Bennett placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are here now. That is enough." Patricia blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Then she straightened her posture. "Good, because I intend to scrub into this operation." A faint smile appeared on Bennett's face, for the first time in years. "You always were my best nurse." Patricia laughed through her tears. "Damn right I was." The moment broke the tension briefly. Yet elsewhere inside the hospital, Victor Hargrove was already moving. His office overlooked the city. From the large windows he could see storm clouds swallowing the skyline. His anger grew with every passing minute. 3 years earlier he had buried Bennett. Now Bennett was walking back into an operating room. Worse, people were beginning to ask questions. Questions Victor could not afford. He grabbed his phone. His first call went to the state medical board. He demanded immediate intervention. He insisted an unlicensed surgeon was preparing to perform a dangerous procedure. The response infuriated him. Emergency authorization had already been approved. Nothing could be done. Victor slammed the phone down, then he made another call. This one went to a reporter. He carefully crafted the story. A homeless man given access to surgery. A desperate billionaire risking his daughter's life. A hospital ignoring regulations. Within minutes, headlines were being drafted. Victor smiled coldly. If Bennett succeeded, Victor would attack his credibility. If Bennett failed, Victor would destroy him permanently. Either outcome seemed acceptable. Back in the surgical preparation room, Bennett stood before a sink. For several moments, he simply stared at the running water. His reflection looked unfamiliar. The beard, the scars, the exhaustion. 3 years on the streets had changed him. Yet beneath everything, he remained the same surgeon. Slowly, he reached into his coat pocket. He removed an old surgical timer. Patricia immediately recognized it. Dr. Voss's timer. Bennett nodded. Never left my side. The engraving remained visible despite years of wear. Steady hands, steady heart. He placed it carefully beside the sink, then clicked the button. Tick, tick, tick. The familiar sound filled the room. A ritual, a promise, a memory. Warm water flowed over his hands. Dirt disappeared down the drain. Street dust vanished. Old wounds became visible. Scars crossed his knuckles. Calluses marked his fingertips. Yet his hands remained perfectly steady. Patricia watched quietly. Years seemed to disappear. The surgeon standing before her looked exactly like the man who once led impossible operations. Outside the room, security personnel increased their presence. Journalists were gathering near the hospital entrance. Administrators scrambled to contain rumors. Inside the intensive care unit, Hannah Ashford's condition continued deteriorating. Her oxygen levels dropped. Her heart struggled. Time was running out. Gregory Ashford stood beside his daughter's bed. Machines surrounded her. Monitors glowed softly in the dim room. The billionaire looked powerless. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this helplessness. Money could not repair her heart. Influence could not reverse her condition. Only skill mattered now. Only Bennett. A nurse entered quietly. "Sir, the surgical team is ready." Gregory glanced through the glass toward the operating floor below. His chest tightened. He had placed his daughter's life into the hands of a man the world had abandoned. Yet somehow, for the first time in days, he felt hope. As the storm raged outside, Bennett finished scrubbing his hands. The timer continued ticking beside him. Steady, relentless, faithful. Then a hospital employee rushed into the room. His face was pale, his breathing was uneven. Everyone turned toward him. The man swallowed hard before speaking. "Dr. Dawson. Someone just tried to shut down the operating room recording system." The room fell silent, and Bennett immediately knew exactly who was responsible. The announcement hit the room like a sudden shockwave. Someone had attempted to disable the operating room recording system. Every person present understood the significance immediately. Bennett Dawson's demand for complete video documentation had not been about pride. It had been about protection. 3 years earlier, evidence vanished. Careers were destroyed. Truth disappeared. Bennett had no intention of allowing history to repeat itself. The hospital technician stood in the doorway breathing heavily. The attempt failed. Relief spread briefly across several faces. The technician continued. "The backup system activated automatically. Every camera is still recording." Patricia Holloway folded her arms. "Good." Pamela Greer exchanged a knowing look with Bennett. Neither needed to ask who might benefit from missing footage. Across the hospital, Victor Hargrove sat alone in his office, staring at his dark computer screen. Rage twisted inside him. His first attempt had failed. The recordings remained active. The surgery would be documented from every angle, every movement, every decision, every result. For the first time in years, Victor faced a dangerous possibility. Proof. Meanwhile, Bennett pushed the distraction from his mind. Hannah Ashford did not have time for politics. She did not have time for revenge. She barely had time at all. He entered operating room 6. The familiar scent of disinfectant filled the air. Bright surgical lights illuminated the room. Monitors glowed softly. Metal instruments rested in perfect order. The environment felt both familiar and surreal. 3 years earlier, Bennett believed he would never stand in an operating room again. Now he stood exactly where he belonged. Patricia adjusted the room temperature before anyone asked. 61 degrees, Bennett noticed immediately. A small smile crossed his face. "You remembered." Patricia shrugged. "Some things matter." The operating team assembled. Pamela Greer stood opposite Bennett. Dr. Nathan Cole prepared anesthesia equipment. Patricia organized surgical instruments with practiced precision. 4 cameras recorded from separate positions. Red indicator lights glowed steadily. Nothing would disappear tonight. Hannah Ashford lay motionless beneath sterile drapes. She looked younger than 18, fragile, exhausted. Her skin carried a bluish tint caused by years of inadequate oxygen circulation. The monitors revealed what everyone already knew. Her heart was failing. Behind observation glass, Gregory Ashford watched silently. He had changed nothing about his appearance. The same suit, the same exhausted eyes, the same overwhelming fear. Money no longer mattered. Only the next few hours mattered. Bennett looked at the timer resting nearby. Then he clicked the button. Tick, tick, tick. Steady hands, steady heart. He picked up the scalpel. Let's begin. The first incision was clean, controlled, confident. Years of experience guided every movement. Minutes passed, then an hour. The room settled into surgical rhythm. Monitors beeped steadily. Instruments exchanged hands. Commands remained calm and precise. As Hannah's chest cavity opened, Bennett finally saw the heart he had spent years imagining and immediately understood the situation was worse than expected. Much worse. The scans had not revealed the full extent of the abnormalities. Critical structures sat in positions no surgeon anticipated. Tissue formations complicated access. Vital pathways appeared more distorted than imaging suggested. Pamela leaned closer, her voice dropped to a whisper. This is worse than the scans. Bennett studied the anatomy carefully. His eyes moved across every vessel, every defect, every possibility. The operating room grew silent. Nobody interrupted. Nobody rushed him. Gregory pressed both hands against the observation window, waiting, praying. The timer continued ticking. 30 seconds passed. Then Bennett finally spoke. We adjust. The words sounded simple. Yet everyone understood what they meant. The entire procedure would need modification. In real time, inside an open chest, on a dying patient. Pamela stared at him. You already recalculated everything. Bennett nodded, already done. The operation continued. Hour after hour. His focus never wavered. The modified Dawson shunt existed nowhere except Bennett's memory. The stolen notebook contained diagrams. Research papers contained theory. But the complete procedure lived only in his mind. Every measurement mattered. Every angle mattered. Every stitch mattered. Outside the operating room, media coverage intensified. News vans gathered near hospital entrances. Reporters speculated endlessly. Social media exploded with rumors. Some questioned Bennett's qualifications. Others defended him. The city became divided over a surgery nobody fully understood. Inside the operating room, none of that mattered. Only Hannah mattered. By the 5th hour, the most difficult phase approached, the neo-conduit, the pathway Bennett had envisioned years earlier. His hands moved beneath magnification. Tiny sutures connected delicate structures. The precision required bordered on impossible. Even Pamela found herself staring. She had worked alongside legendary surgeons, yet she had never witnessed hands this steady. Never. Then everything changed. A warning tone erupted from the monitor, sharp, sudden, terrifying. Every head turned instantly. Nathan Cole looked at the screen, his face drained of color. The room froze. Hannah's heart rhythm had become chaotic, dangerously unstable. Another alarm sounded, then another. The monitor numbers plummeted. Gregory Ashford slammed both palms against the observation glass. Patricia's hands tightened around an instrument tray. Pamela's breathing stopped. Nathan reached toward emergency equipment. Then the monitor emitted a single continuous tone. Flat. Unbroken. Merciless. Hannah Ashford's heart had stopped, and every person in the room turned toward Bennett Dawson. The flatline tone seemed to swallow the entire operating room. Every monitor displayed the same terrifying reality. Hannah Ashford's heart had stopped. The sound cut through the room like a blade. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Then chaos threatened to erupt. Nathan Cole reached toward the emergency defibrillator. Pamela Greer stared at the monitor. Patricia Holloway felt her stomach drop. Behind the observation glass, Gregory Ashford's face went completely white. His daughter was dying. Again. But Bennett Dawson did not panic. His pulse never changed. His breathing remained steady. Years of training took over. He looked at the monitor once, then at Hannah's heart, internal cardiac massage. The words came out calm and firm. Nathan paused. Pamela immediately understood. Everyone else followed Bennett's lead. He reached carefully into Hannah's open chest. The room became silent except for the flatline alarm. Bennett gently cupped the failing heart between his hands. It felt fragile, exhausted, almost defeated, but not yet gone, not while he still had a chance. He began rhythmic compressions, precise, controlled, every movement measured, every second mattered. Behind the glass, Gregory slammed both fists against the window. The impact echoed through the room. No one looked away. No one dared speak. Bennett started counting. 1, 2, 3. His voice remained steady. The monitor remained flat. 10, 11, 12, nothing. 20, 21, 22, still nothing. Gregory's lips moved silently, praying, begging, promising anything. Everything. 30, 31, 32. Pamela watched the monitor. No change. Patricia gripped the edge of the instrument table so tightly her knuckles turned white. 40, 41, 42. The timer continued ticking from the shelf, steady, relentless, like a heartbeat refusing surrender. 50, 51, 52. Nathan shook his head slightly. The odds were disappearing. From 60, 61, 62, still nothing. The room felt frozen in time. Even the storm outside seemed distant. Only the count remained. 70, 71, 72. Gregory's eyes filled with tears. His daughter had survived 18 difficult years. She could not die now. Not like this. Not after coming so close. 80, 81, 82. Nathan slowly reached toward the defibrillator again, preparing for the next step, preparing for the possibility nobody wanted to face. 88. A faint sound appeared, tiny, almost imaginary. Beep. Everyone froze. 89. Another beep, weak but real. 90. The monitor suddenly flickered. A rhythm emerged, slow, fragile, alive. Nathan exhaled so hard his mask fogged. Patricia covered her mouth. Pamela closed her eyes briefly. Behind the glass, Gregory collapsed into a chair. His legs could no longer support him. The heartbeat strengthened, not perfect, not stable, but present. Hannah had returned. Bennett removed his hands carefully, then picked up the surgical instrument waiting beside him. No celebration, no dramatic speech. He simply continued operating. The room followed. Hour after hour passed. The modified Dawson shunt slowly took shape. Each connection required impossible precision. Every suture carried life or death consequences. The operation entered its most dangerous phase. The final connection. The critical junction. Tissue thinner than paper waited beneath magnification. One mistake would cause catastrophic bleeding. One tremor would end everything. Silence dominated the room. Even breathing sounded loud. Patricia gently wiped sweat from Bennett's forehead. Neither spoke. They had performed hundreds of surgeries together years ago. Their teamwork felt unchanged. The timer continued ticking. Steady hands, steady heart. Bennett positioned the needle. The delicate suture entered fragile tissue. Millimeter by millimeter. No rush, no hesitation. Pamela barely breathed. Nathan watched the monitors. Gregory stood once more behind the glass. The entire future of his daughter rested inside Bennett's fingertips. Finally, the final knot was secured. Bennett looked toward Pamela, released the clamp. She obeyed immediately. Everyone stared. Blood entered the new pathway, flowing through the conduit, moving toward structures that had never functioned properly before. The monitor numbers began changing, slowly. Then faster. 72% oxygen saturation, 76, 81, 88, 92, 96, 98. Nobody spoke, nobody could. For the first time in Hannah Ashford's life, her heart functioned normally. Pamela stared at the monitor. Tears filled her eyes. It worked. My God, it actually worked. Behind the observation glass, Gregory's knees gave out. The billionaire slowly slid to the floor, his forehead pressed against the window. His shoulders shook uncontrollably. Years of fear, days of terror, hours of helplessness. Everything finally broke free. Inside the operating room, Bennett clicked the timer. The ticking stopped. 11 hours had passed. The surgery was complete. Hannah Ashford was alive. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then applause erupted inside the operating room. Patricia cried openly. Nathan removed his mask and laughed with relief. Pamela shook her head in disbelief. Only Bennett remained quiet. He removed his gloves and looked down at his scarred hands. The same hands the world had dismissed. The same hands that had spent 3 years stitching scraps of fabric on cold sidewalks. The same hands that had just accomplished what 10 of the nation's most celebrated surgeons could not. But while joy spread through the operating room, another battle had already begun elsewhere in the hospital, because deep inside the basement server room, security officers had just discovered Victor Hargrove standing in front of the recording system. And this time, he had been caught on camera. The celebration inside Operating Room 6 lasted only moments. Reality returned quickly. Hannah Ashford was alive, but the consequences of what had happened were only beginning. Outside the operating room, Whitfield Memorial Hospital stood on the edge of a scandal that threatened to destroy some of its most powerful figures. Security officers escorted Victor Hargrove from the basement server room shortly after the surgery ended. The chief surgeon attempted to maintain his composure, but his expression revealed growing panic. Hospital surveillance cameras had captured everything: his identification badge, his access code, his presence at the recording terminal. Most importantly, the screen displayed an active deletion command targeting the surgical footage. This time, there was no corrupted file, no missing evidence, no convenient system failure. Everything had been recorded. Victor demanded lawyers. He demanded explanations. He demanded authority. Nobody listened. For years, administrators had feared him. For years, employees protected him because of his influence. Yet the successful surgery changed the balance of power overnight. People who once remained silent suddenly found courage. Meanwhile, Bennett sat alone on a bench outside the recovery unit. His surgical scrubs were stained from 11 exhausting hours of work. Every muscle in his body ached. His eyes remained closed. Not because he was sleeping, because he was finally allowing himself to breathe. The hallway remained unusually quiet. Rain still tapped against distant windows. Machines hummed softly. Nurses moved carefully through recovery rooms. For the first time in years, Bennett felt peace. Footsteps approached. He opened his eyes. Gregory Ashford stood before him. The billionaire looked completely different from the man Bennett met earlier. His expensive suit remained wrinkled. His face showed exhaustion, yet something else had replaced the fear. Relief, pure relief. Neither man spoke immediately. Words seemed inadequate. Finally, Gregory lowered himself to one knee. Several nurses gasped. People throughout the hallway stopped moving. Few had ever seen Gregory Ashford bow to anyone. Yet there he was, kneeling before a man who had spent 3 years sleeping on sidewalks. "You gave me back my daughter," his voice cracked. Bennett looked at him quietly, then answered, "You gave me back my operating room." The two men held each other's gaze. In that moment, wealth and status meant nothing. Only gratitude remained. Elsewhere in the hospital, investigators began reviewing archived records connected to Bennett's termination. Gregory Ashford personally demanded answers. His legal team moved quickly. They requested files. They requested reports. They requested every document related to Tommy Weston's death. What they discovered shocked everyone. The disciplinary report contained inconsistencies. Access logs revealed unusual activity. Missing records appeared connected to Victor Hargrove's personal account. The deeper investigators looked, the worse the situation became. Rumors spread rapidly through the hospital. Doctors whispered in hallways, nurses exchanged nervous glances, administrators locked themselves inside conference rooms. Many sensed a storm approaching, a storm more dangerous than anything outside. That evening, Hannah remained heavily sedated in intensive care. Machines monitored her progress. The repaired heart continued functioning beautifully. Oxygen levels stayed stable. Blood circulation improved steadily. For the first time in years, her body received what it needed: life. Gregory refused to leave her bedside. Every few minutes he glanced at the monitors. Every few minutes he smiled. The numbers looked ordinary to most people. To him, they looked miraculous. Across town, however, media attention intensified. News channels flooded the airwaves. The story captivated New York. A homeless former surgeon had returned to save a billionaire's daughter after 10 specialists failed. Viewers debated every detail. Some questioned the hospital. Some questioned Bennett. Many began questioning Victor Hargrove. The public narrative was changing rapidly. For years, Bennett's name appeared beside words like negligence and tragedy. Now people spoke a different language: talent, sacrifice, redemption. Late that night, Patricia Holloway found Bennett standing alone near a window overlooking the city. Light stretched endlessly across Manhattan. Rain had finally stopped. The streets below glistened beneath reflections from traffic and skyscrapers. Patricia approached quietly. "You should be proud." Bennett smiled faintly. "I'm tired," she laughed softly. "Fair enough." Then her expression became serious. "The investigation is uncovering things. People are talking." Bennett looked toward the city. For years he imagined this moment, the truth finally emerging. Yet now that it was happening, he felt strangely detached. Tommy Weston was still gone. Nothing could change that. No investigation, no apology, no courtroom. Patricia seemed to read his thoughts. His parents deserved the truth. The words landed heavily. Bennett nodded. "Yes, they do." As midnight approached, hospital investigators accessed another backup server. Most employees did not even know it existed. The system contained archived files automatically stored years earlier, protected copies, unaltered copies, forgotten copies. A technician opened one folder, then another. His eyes widened. He immediately called the investigation team. Within minutes, administrators crowded around computer screens. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved, because displayed before them was something everyone believed had disappeared forever: the original operating room footage from Tommy Weston's surgery. The footage Victor Hargrove claimed had been lost. The footage that could reveal exactly what happened 3 years earlier. And as investigators pressed play, Bennett Dawson's entire future hung on what the cameras were about to show. The investigation room remained silent as the recovered footage began playing on the monitor. Administrators crowded around the screen. Attorneys stood with folded arms. Senior physicians watched without speaking. Every person present understood the significance of what they were about to see. For 3 years, this video had been considered lost. For 3 years, Bennett Dawson had carried the blame. For 3 years, the truth remained buried. Now the evidence was finally speaking for itself. The recording showed Tommy Weston's surgery from beginning to end. The young boy lay on the operating table, surrounded by medical staff. Bennett worked calmly and confidently. The repair progressed exactly as documented in his original notes. Vitals remained stable. Blood flow remained controlled. Everything looked successful. Then Victor Hargrove entered the procedure. The room watching the footage grew tense. Nobody looked away. The video captured every movement, every decision, every second. There was no ambiguity, no missing footage, no technical failure, no room for interpretation. Victor took control of the operation. Then came the mistake. A catastrophic mistake. The wrong vessel. The wrong cut. The exact error Bennett had described years earlier. Several administrators exchanged shocked looks. One physician lowered his head, another quietly whispered a curse. The footage continued. Blood flooded the surgical field. Bennett immediately reacted. He attempted repairs. He called for supplies. He fought desperately to save the child. The video showed everything. Not negligence, not incompetence, not recklessness. Heroic effort. Relentless effort. Ultimately, Tommy died, but now everyone could see why. The wrong man had been blamed. By sunrise, the investigation accelerated dramatically. Hospital executives called emergency meetings. Attorneys reviewed evidence. Board members demanded explanations. The situation worsened further when investigators opened another file. This one contained access records, digital footprints, login histories, deletion commands. Every trail pointed toward Victor Hargrove. Every trail. There were no exceptions, no alternative explanations, no misunderstandings. Victor's carefully constructed story was collapsing. Meanwhile, Bennett remained unaware of most developments. He spent the night near Hannah's recovery room, not because anyone asked him to stay, because surgeons never truly leave their patients. The hospital lights dimmed during the early morning hours, hallways quieted. Machines continued their steady rhythms. Through the recovery room window, Bennett watched Hannah sleeping peacefully. The color in her face had already improved. Her breathing appeared easier. Her body was finally receiving proper oxygen. Years of strain were beginning to lift. Pamela Greer joined him. She carried 2 cups of coffee, one for herself, one for Bennett. He accepted it gratefully. Neither spoke for several moments. The city outside remained dark. Rain clouds slowly drifted away. Eventually, Pamela broke the silence. "You know they are going to clear your name." Bennett stared through the glass. "Maybe." She shook her head. "Not maybe. Definitely. The evidence is overwhelming." Bennett smiled faintly. "It still won't bring Tommy back." Pamela's expression softened. "No, it won't. But it matters anyway." The conversation ended there. Some truths required no further discussion. Later that morning, another discovery shook the hospital. Investigators entered Victor Hargrove's office with a search warrant. Filing cabinets were opened. Computer drives were examined. Desk drawers were searched. Most employees expected financial records, emails, correspondence. Instead, they found something astonishing. At the bottom of a locked drawer sat a black leather notebook. The moment investigators opened it, they understood its importance. Detailed diagrams filled every page. Handwritten calculations, research notes, surgical sketches, years of work, years of innovation, years of dedication. The missing Dawson notebook, the one confiscated after Bennett's dismissal, the one that supposedly vanished, the one containing the original modified Dawson shunt. Investigators compared the contents to Victor's later patent application. The similarities were undeniable. Page after page matched, diagram after diagram matched, measurements matched, concepts matched, everything matched. What began as a medical scandal was becoming something larger. Fraud, theft, obstruction, potential criminal charges. News of the discovery spread quickly. Reporters gathered outside the hospital. Cameras lined the sidewalks. Headlines shifted dramatically. Questions intensified. Public opinion changed by the hour. Inside Whitfield Memorial, employees who once feared Victor began speaking openly. Stories emerged, complaints surfaced, old incidents returned. People who remained silent for years finally found their voices. Victor's influence evaporated. His allies disappeared. His authority vanished. The empire he built through intimidation began collapsing around him. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Shortly after noon, hospital security escorted Victor Hargrove from the building. Employees watched from windows. Nurses stood along hallways. Doctors paused between rounds. Nobody applauded. Nobody cheered. The silence felt heavier than any celebration. Victor carried a small cardboard box containing personal belongings. The same hospital he once controlled now treated him like a stranger. As the elevator doors closed behind him, a nurse quietly whispered 4 words. The truth finally won. But the greatest surprise had not arrived yet, because only hours later, Hannah Ashford opened her eyes for the first time since the surgery. And the very first thing she said would bring her father to tears. Sunlight finally broke through the clouds above Manhattan. After days of rain and uncertainty, the city woke beneath clear skies. The morning light spilled through the windows of Whitfield Memorial Hospital, casting warmth across hallways that had felt cold and tense for years. Inside the intensive care unit, machines hummed softly around Hannah Ashford's bed. Her condition continued improving. Every reading looked stronger. Every breath came easier. Every hour brought progress. Gregory Ashford had barely moved from his chair. His suit remained wrinkled. His eyes showed exhaustion. Yet for the first time in days, hope outweighed fear. When Hannah's fingers moved slightly against the blanket, Gregory immediately leaned forward. His heart raced. Doctors stepped closer. Nurses paused nearby. Slowly, Hannah opened her eyes. The room seemed to stop. Gregory swallowed hard. Tears already filled his eyes. For several seconds, Hannah simply looked around. The lights, the machines, the faces. Then her gaze settled on her father. A weak smile appeared. "Daddy." The single word shattered every wall Gregory had built around himself. His shoulders trembled, his eyes overflowed. He reached for her hand immediately. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." Hannah squeezed his fingers. Her voice remained weak but clear. "Something feels different." Gregory leaned closer. "Different how?" She blinked slowly. "I feel warm." The word struck him harder than anything else. Warm. Such a simple word. Yet Hannah had spent most of her life fighting poor circulation. Cold hands, cold feet, constant fatigue. Now her body finally worked the way it should. Gregory lowered his head and cried openly. Not as a billionaire, not as a businessman, simply as a father. Several nurses quietly wiped away tears. Even doctors looked away to compose themselves. A miracle had happened. Not the supernatural kind. The human kind. The kind created by courage, sacrifice, and extraordinary skill. 2 hours later, Gregory left Hannah resting comfortably and searched for Bennett. He found him sitting alone near a large window overlooking the city. The surgeon appeared exhausted. The events of the past 24 hours weighed heavily on him. Yet he looked peaceful, for the first time in years. Gregory sat beside him. Neither spoke immediately. Traffic moved below. Sunlight reflected from distant skyscrapers. Life continued across Manhattan. Finally, Gregory broke the silence. "She asked about you." Bennett smiled faintly. "How is she? Stronger every hour." The two men watched the city together. Different worlds, different lives, connected forever. Meanwhile, the investigation continued, producing shocking revelations. Evidence accumulated rapidly. The recovered surgery footage, the stolen notebook, the altered reports, the deletion attempts. Every discovery strengthened Bennett's innocence. Every discovery deepened Victor Hargrove's downfall. State investigators arrived at the hospital. Legal teams reviewed thousands of documents. Hospital board members held emergency meetings around the clock. What started as a review became a complete institutional reckoning. Employees who once feared speaking now stepped forward voluntarily. Nurses provided testimony, technicians shared records. Former staff members revealed incidents long hidden from public view. The truth spread faster than anyone expected. And the truth was devastating. Victor had not simply destroyed Bennett, he had manipulated an entire system. That realization shook Whitfield Memorial to its foundation. Several days later, a formal hearing convened before representatives of the Medical Licensing Board. Bennett entered the room wearing borrowed clothes, simple, professional, respectful. No designer suits, no expensive attorneys, just facts, just truth. The hearing lasted hours. Investigators presented evidence, witnesses testified, experts reviewed footage, questions were answered, records were examined. By the end, the outcome was obvious. No reasonable doubt remained. Bennett Dawson had been wrongfully blamed, wrongfully terminated, wrongfully disgraced. The board members voted unanimously. His medical license would be fully restored. Several people applauded quietly, others simply nodded. The decision felt less like victory and more like justice finally catching up. Outside the hearing room, reporters waited. Cameras flashed, microphones extended forward. Questions came from every direction. Bennett answered only one. "What does this moment mean to you?" He thought carefully before speaking. "A child lost his life because the truth was ignored. If anything good comes from this, let it be that we never ignore the truth again." The statement appeared across news broadcasts nationwide. People shared it, discussed it, remembered it. Yet Bennett's thoughts remained elsewhere. Not on headlines, not on fame, not on revenge. He thought about Tommy Weston. He thought about Ruth Dawson. He thought about every child who still needed help. One evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, Gregory Ashford invited Bennett to the rooftop garden of the hospital. The city glowed beneath a golden sky. Airplanes crossed the horizon, lights slowly appeared across the skyline. Gregory handed Bennett a sealed folder. "What's this?" "Open it." Bennett did. His eyes widened. Construction plans, architectural drawings, funding documents, a brand new pediatric cardiac center, dedicated entirely to helping children with complex heart conditions. Gregory smiled. There was only one name listed as director: Bennett Dawson. The surgeon stared at the documents, speechless. For years he had slept on benches. Now an entirely new future stood before him. Gregory placed a hand on his shoulder. This is only the beginning. Bennett looked back toward the city, toward endless lights stretching into the distance, toward possibilities he never believed he would see again. And as night settled over Manhattan, one final piece of news arrived. Victor Hargrove had been formally arrested. The charges were extensive, the evidence overwhelming, and for the first time since Tommy Weston's death, accountability was finally coming. The arrest of Victor Hargrove dominated headlines across the country. News stations covered every development. Medical journals discussed the case. Hospital administrators everywhere studied the investigation as a warning of what happens when power goes unchecked. For Bennett Dawson, however, the headlines meant very little. He had never wanted fame. He had never wanted revenge. He had only wanted the truth. And finally, after years of silence, the truth stood in the open for everyone to see. Weeks passed. Spring sunlight brightened Manhattan. Trees along the city streets began to bloom. The cold grey atmosphere that had surrounded Bennett's life slowly faded. Construction crews worked day and night on the new pediatric cardiac center, funded by Gregory Ashford. Steel beams rose into the sky. Glass walls reflected the city skyline. Every stage of construction represented something Bennett thought he had lost forever: a future. One afternoon, Bennett received a package delivered to his temporary office. The return label carried no name. Inside sat a sealed evidence bag, his black leather notebook. For a long moment he simply stared. Years of research, years of sacrifice, years of dreams, all contained within those worn pages. His fingers moved slowly across the cover. Every crease looked familiar. Every mark carried a memory. Bennett opened the notebook carefully. The diagrams remained exactly as he remembered. The calculations, the notes, the countless revisions. Nothing had been lost. He placed the notebook on a shelf beside Dr. Eleanor Voss's surgical timer. Together, where they belonged. A few days later, Bennett made a phone call, one he had imagined many times. His mother answered before the second ring. She always did. "Hello, baby." "Hello?" The familiar warmth in her voice immediately softened something inside him. For nearly an hour, Bennett told her everything. The surgery, the investigation, the hearing, the new hospital, the restored license. Ruth Dawson listened quietly, never interrupting, never rushing, simply listening the way mothers do. When he finally finished, silence filled the line. Then came her response: "I always knew." Bennett smiled. She continued, "I always knew who you were." Tears filled his eyes, not because of what she said, because she never stopped believing it. Months later, the Dawson-Voss Pediatric Cardiac Center officially opened. The ceremony attracted physicians, community leaders, reporters, and families from across the country. Yet the most meaningful guests were the children. Children who had survived impossible diagnoses. Children who now had hope. Children who represented the reason Bennett became a surgeon in the first place. The hospital entrance featured no statues, no oversized portraits, no displays celebrating wealth or influence. Instead, visitors encountered a simple inscription: "Every child deserves a chance." Those words became the center's mission. Bennett insisted that a significant portion of surgeries remain available to families unable to afford treatment. Gregory Ashford agreed immediately. No negotiations, no conditions, just a promise, and a promise kept. Meanwhile, Hannah Ashford continued thriving. Her recovery exceeded expectations. She gained strength. She gained energy. She gained possibilities. One bright morning, she ran through Central Park, not walking, not struggling, running. Her laughter carried through the air. Her cheeks glowed with color. Her heart beat exactly as nature intended. For the first time in her life, she understood what healthy felt like. Several weeks later, she visited Bennett. In her hands, she carried a painting. The artwork was simple: a man in a worn jacket, a small timer, a city skyline behind him. At the bottom, she had written 2 words, "My hero." Bennett stared at the painting for a long moment, then carefully hung it in his office. Not near awards, not near certificates, near the door, where he could see it every day. Years passed. The modified Dawson shunt transformed pediatric cardiac medicine. Children once considered inoperable now received opportunities that never existed before. Hospitals around the world adopted the technique. Lives were saved. Families remained whole, hope replaced despair. Yet Bennett never forgot where he came from. His old jacket still hung inside his office, not framed, not protected, simply hanging beside his white coat. Visitors often asked why. Bennett always gave the same answer. Because both belonged to me. The jacket reminded him of suffering. The coat reminded him of purpose. Together they told the truth. The world can take your title. The world can take your reputation. The world can take your comfort. But it cannot take what lives inside you. Talent does not disappear because others refuse to recognize it. Character does not vanish because others spread lies. And worth is not determined by the people who try to throw you away. Every morning before surgery, Bennett still clicked the old timer. Tick, tick, tick. The sound echoed softly through the operating room. Steady hands, steady heart. The lesson remained unchanged. Life will test you. People will doubt you. Some will even try to destroy you. But if you hold on to your purpose, if you refuse to let your gifts die, your moment can still come. Sometimes the world discovers your value long after it should have. And sometimes redemption arrives through a door everyone believed was permanently closed. Bennett Dawson walked through that door, not because the world welcomed him, because someone needed him, and he never forgot who he was. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, your viewing location, and share this video.